Right. So we get started. Before we have the pleasure of having Aadesh, Venki, and Ganesh to start the session, I will give a quick introduction to Arka Venture Labs. So Arka Venture Labs is a B2B focused fund where we invest in startups in India who are looking into the US markets. We also invest in US startups having offices in India. We started around 2 years back, and so far we have made 9 investments. And Ganesh, dotin is one of the investments that we have made. So we are very happy about this partnership. And what we provide is we provide investment, and we also provide mentoring, and then we provide the connects to the ecosystem. So today's topic is all around talent management, and this has been very interesting topic. It's always been a very interesting topic, and with the COVID happening, I think this becomes an even more intriguing and challenging topic. And to that effect, we have Aadesh, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer of Tata Communication, and Venki, who heads the Business Analytics and AI division from TCS. And Ganesh, who is the founder of dotin. I'll quickly introduce Ganesh to all of you, and let Ganesh have the honors to introduce Aadesh and Venki. So Ganesh is, as I said, founder of dotin, and he comes with an extensive background with TCS and AMD before starting dotin. And he has got a double master's in engineering and MBA from Stanford University. And to all of you, dotin is basically, it provides a personality assessment by giving the user a choice of 100 color palette combinations, and the user has to select just 10 out of in less than a minute. And once he selects that, his personality is assessed, and this is being used by recruiters in terms for finding the right fit for a particular candidate for a particular job role, as well as by people within organization to do talent management of their employees, and also by learning management providers to see what courses would be suitable for a particular person. And in fact, all of you can also take that test. It's a assessment test, also personality assessment test. You can go to the website dotin.us. So over to you, Ganesh. All yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Radhesh. Appreciate this opportunity. Very excited to be presenting two of our esteemed guest panels. Aadesh, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer for Tata Communication. He has more than 25 years of leadership experience in M&A, P&L management, human resource operations, IT, corporate information, as well as the program management. He holds master's degree from BITS Pilani, and he has a passion around communication services, community services. And also Venki, who is joining us from US. He heads the business analytics and the delivery unit for TCS, for analytics and insights business unit. He has a very solid BFSI background, 20 plus years of experience. His background is more into economics, costing, accounting, and management. So with that being said, I'm very happy to have both of you. Aadesh, I'm looking at you more as a subject matter expertise who can give some insights more from the aspect of companies facing inwards. How do we come out of this COVID challenge? And I'm looking at Venki to share some of the nuggets that he's seeing as he's deploying some of the services to his customers and partners. So with that, probably Aadesh, I'll start with you. We were fortunate to get some of the questions from the audience before we got into the session, so I've just curated some of them. If that's okay with you, I'll go through some of them with you.
Just a sec. I think we can also open it for question answers during the session, and you can actually take up some of the questions from the audience also to kind of keep an interactive session.
Sure, Radhesh, happy to do that. And for the folks who are on the call, feel free to add any questions that you may have. Would love to pick it up as we go through the question answers. So Aadesh, starting with you. I know everyone is going through this new normal of working from home. Fundamentally, it has shifted quite a bit of our work culture as well as in our personal space as well. How do you see the COVID-19 impacting your organization, and how are you dealing with it? If you can share some of the nuggets, that'll be really great.
Great. Hello, everyone. Good to be a part of this event and look forward to learning from each one of us, including Venki. Tata Communications is a global company. We have employees in 40 countries. We have customers in 200 countries. And we have about 19,500 employees. So it's been actually quite amazing for us. In many ways, pandemic has been good. Personally, for me, 15 days of travel a month, zero travel for the last 5 months, and about 2.5 hours of commute, both ways put together when I'm in town, zero commute. And I'm using that time a lot for community service. So personally, amazing for me. Also amazing because it's been a lot of learning. We are doing an experiment which was not possible to do in a lab. And this has really created a global experiment. So, we were primarily a company which was, had only 2% of our employees primarily working from home. And in a matter of 8-9 days, we went from 2% working from home to 98% working from home. And if somebody had asked me whether we'll be able to do it, till the time it happened, I would have said, no, are you crazy? But that has been a great learning for us that, the zeal, the enthusiasm, and the latent capabilities that people have really came to the fore. And people collaborated like I've never seen people collaborate. The speed at which people were working was just phenomenal. And a lot of real problems are being solved in time to really enable this transition. And the way our teams did it without dropping a ball from the point of view of operations or customer requirements, it actually was magical. And being a company that's into communication services, about 1/4 of the world's internet traffic goes through a network. As more people use Zoom and Teams and Netflix and Google Meet, our requirement actually increased. People wanted to set up new circuits, people wanted to increase capacity, and our teams were able to really deliver that while we were in the business continuity mode, people working from home in this pandemic environment. And it's been great learning for us. So many people said that they have learned new stuff and they have done stuff that they didn't think they could do, and they have seen other people do stuff that they didn't think they could do. So that's, I think, my biggest learning. We have kept safety as the first priority. We have a daily meeting of the BCM task force, and we have this point that we are going to keep employee safety as the foremost. If we have to compromise something else, we will do that. But that, I think, has been appreciated a lot by employees. Because we are the entire HR runs on a digital platform globally, accessible to employees 24/7. We were able to quickly create learning pathways for employees on how can they deal with working from home better. We were able to create pathways for managers on how could they engage their teams which are only working from home now. And it really happened in real time. We created virtual works type of fun contests that, people will dress up as this theme or that theme. They'll bring their family member into a call. So people were able to create lots of fun around working from home. And that I think was very, very helpful for us. And we distributed it. We didn't say you have to do it like this, right? So we said, hey, this group is doing this. What is it that you want to do? And share it on the social platform that we have. We use Yammer, and one thing led to the other, and it's still going on, right? So the first stage for us, what I've described to you, was the response state, right? It happened suddenly. We had not planned for it, and then I think the response went off really well. And then every week you're realizing it's still going on, and then you start to rebuild because it's now been going on for nearly 6 months. And then you start putting together systems that will help you to go and do this well over months, right? So, for example, there were certain people who were primarily working only from office, and we created arrangements such that they didn't really have to go back home, because with the lockdown, we weren't sure if people could go back home, right? And then they were there for 4 weeks, and then we realized that they are going to get burnout. So how do you start rotating and still doing the safe environment? So that, and also in terms of IT infrastructure, uh, in terms of security infrastructure. Also, we started to notice that the initial excitement of doing this in the new way was also leading to people feeling a continuum. Right, you're at home, you work, your day ends, you're still at home, and people are kind of working continuously, not able to get a break for commuting or for meeting a colleague for lunch or for a coffee break. And then we started to really do live mindfulness sessions, and we did that. There was like a huge uptake, and I'm also a happiness teacher. I'm a trained meditation teacher, so I did that. I did some initially. Then the demand was so much I couldn't cope up with it, so we invited many others. We worked with the Art of Living Foundation, and they provided us some trained teachers, and we actually extended it to the entire Tata group. So we started doing stuff like that, right? And during the pandemic, when we did a dipstick, the engagement of employees actually went up by 10%. We are already a top quartile company globally, and even within that, we went 10% up. Right? That was engagement, and we have done another dipstick 5 or 6 weeks back, and we are now back to what it was in February. Right, so the excitement is over. It's leading. More people are now seeing they're kind of sick working at home. They want to get out, but situation doesn't allow it. So we are now working on well-being, and we are working on work-life balance. How do we really enable that? So overall, I think it's been a great experience. Our teams have done a phenomenal job. We have learned also that a lot of work can be done virtually, and that's been a big bonus. So many lessons learned, and we will be using these, as we reimagine the future. So response, then rebuild, and we will now work on reimagining the future. You're on mute, Ganesh.
That's the beauty about Zoom. At least you can see the video and see people are just talking and they are on mute. So thank you, Aadesh. Before I go into Venki, one question I had was: do you anticipate your workforce coming back to the office in 2020, Aadesh?
This is a very hard question to answer. But if you ask me to hazard a guess right now, I don't see that happening, in this calendar year. So we still have about 95% of our workforce working from home.
Wow, that's amazing. Looks like you have embraced this new norm, and some of the new nuggets that you shared more into the happiness index. I've seen that being implemented in some of the companies with great success, where they are seeing the employee engagement also increasing. Thank you for sharing those nuggets with us, Aadesh. So Venki, question to you is, as you are implementing some of the solutions from the external perspective in the customer side, how do you see this being impacted to your customers, and how are you supporting the costs in terms of making sure the business continuity is there and they can basically have a good output as they are going through these uncertain situations?
Sure. Thank you for that, Ganesh. And it was wonderful to hear Aadesh's opening comments and how beautifully he's managing the situation in his company. And, some of the things that he mentioned around employee burnout, employee wellness, I think most of this is a focus for all the customers that we work with. And importantly, I'm going to be covering this more from a data analytics standpoint, because what cannot be measured cannot be controlled. And therein lies the HR-related challenge. While I think a lot of HR heads understand the key matrices that they want to look at and manage and control, I think a lot of the organizations are struggling and grappling with the foundational data that is necessary for driving some of the outcomes. So I'm going to be talking about it slightly at a higher level in terms of how we are working with customers on the core data analytics strategy. And then I'll bring it down one level below to establish the relevance of that to the HR function. So talking to CXOs across organizations, if there is one pain or problem that they are living with, is the sheer frustration in being able to accelerate various kinds of business outcomes. And what I mean by that is, what is the journey from data to insights to action, right? And and it's pretty much related to the HR context as well, and the various things that we want to manage. What data do the organizations have? What insights does that data give about people and people engagement? And what actions do the HR heads and business heads need to take to control the situation? So we have looked at it as an entire continuum to be able to see how can one accelerate the journey from the data source to the outcomes that one needs to drive, right? While the focus and the spotlight needs to be on the outcomes and the actions that the HR head or the CHRO needs to take, most of the companies are still grappling with the foundational issues around data, which is related to, what data sources, how do you process the data, what is the quality of the data, is the data good enough, how do you make sure you're able to integrate the data and to be able to drive the right kind of outcomes. I think some of the foundational issues most organizations are grappling with, and that clearly impacts the outcomes and the value that an organization is able to get out of it, right? So we've looked at it broadly as, what we call the D3 strategy. And D3 stands for Datum, Desmo, and Decision Fabric. And this is pretty much the strategy that we've employed with all customers across functions. So we understand that different organizations are at different levels of maturity, and even within organizations and industries, we find that the HR organization is a little behind, but that's rapidly changing, and that's the good news. We are seeing an increasing amount of focus on data-driven decision-making in the HR function. So in that context, how is Datum going to help? It's important that organizations are able to understand where they are in terms of their process, people, technology, and data, and to be able to benchmark and see where they are against the best in the industry, and how do you actually create a roadmap for data maturity. I think that's one big focus area for us. The second thing is, the foundational aspect of data that I talked about earlier. How do you build what we call a future-ready data platform using technology-based accelerators? A lot of this is technology-based solutions. So we bring that under the Desmo suite of solutions. And the last set of activities, which is about driving outcomes and value from data, is the ability to bring what we call a decision fabric-based solution, which pretty much has the ability to bring in a lot of structured data, unstructured data. Especially in the HR context, there is a whole lot of unstructured data. Employees are talking to employers all the time, and they're doing it through various channels. So the ability to integrate structured data, unstructured data, seamlessly run it past various kinds of algorithms to be able to drive insights and provide key takeaways and actionable insights to the various CXOs to be able to take action. So that's broadly how we have been looking at this. And all of this is hugely metric driven. No amount of these solutions can be deployed effectively if the CROs or the CHROs or the head of sales and marketing, the various functions, know what is the KPI that they want to manage. I think that metric is very important. And from a CHRO standpoint, specifically things like how do you look at payroll costs? How do you look at employee attrition? How do you look at employee issues and concerns, right? There are various moments of truth for an employee across the life cycle. So how do you capture them and control them? How do you look at employee hiring costs? Stuff like that, and being able to bring in data analytics to bear upon these specific KPIs and outcomes that a CHRO is typically responsible for driving for. So this is broadly how we have looked at it, and this is broadly our way of partnering with customers and specifically the CHROs.
That's great. That's great. As you're helping the customers, are you also looking into creating specific solution around COVID-19 to address that problem, or are you taking your existing solution to the market?
No, I think COVID-19 is kind of, I should say, turned the spotlight on the relevance of today and the pandemic, right? So I think the situation is much more challenging today than ever before. As Aadesh was covering initially, I think given that the employees are working remotely and the face-to-face interaction, which is so important for people engagement, if that is missing, data analytics is even more important, right? I mean, what are the data points that tell organizations, is the employee engaged? Is the employee motivated? How do you make sure you're able to pick it up on a real-time basis and manage employee emotions, right? I think all of these, and there are continuous data triggers. One needs to be smart enough to pick up these data triggers on a real-time basis. And what is very critical is to be able to digitize as much as the process as possible. And therein comes in the strength of our solution, looking at the process end to end, looking at digitization of the solution and being able to understand employee experience on a real-time basis, and then take a metric-driven approach to the various KPIs and the outcome one needs to drive. I think more than ever before, it's important to look at digitization, look at a metric-driven approach, and actually drive strategy on the ground to be able to improve the employee engagement index. So that's broadly been our approach. And, a lot of this is also AI-based solutions. One can't keep working on insights and data day in and day out. So you want to be having machine learning-based solutions that continuously learn, looks at data, looks at employee feedback, bring that employee feedback back in, and then on a real-time basis, improve the actionable insights that you want to drive. So that's broadly how we have been approaching this.
That's great. That's really great. Thanks for sharing those nuggets. Thank you. I see a question from the chat window. Aadesh, if it's okay, I will pick one of the question to you. The question is, what changes do you see in the hiring process post COVID-19? Aadesh, you're on mute.
Yeah, very, very interesting question. I don't see the hiring process change per se, right? Other than the fact that even hiring has become virtual, right? Everything has become virtual in the last 5-6 months. So I think people will use more virtual methods of hiring and not necessarily any direct impact of COVID, but what is certainly going to happen is the companies that are realizing the work could be done anywhere, they would not say, at least for certain jobs, where they feel comfortable that you need to be coming to this office or that office or in this city or that location. They'll say, okay, wherever you are, you can work, and it could make many jobs that were very attached or married to a location could become global now, right? And we are already seeing a trend of people not necessarily living in metros, and people are moving towards suburban areas. And I think those types of trends will pick up speed.
Interesting. Do you see the selection process changing as a part of the hiring? Are you going to be focusing some of the aspects beyond what you're looking for in the current era?
See, I think when you work virtually, there are certain requirements that become much more pronounced and important compared to when you're working in person, right? So, for example, can you be more independent is going to be a requirement for many jobs. Number two, how well you are able to collaborate in a virtual environment. So that means how are your interpersonal and team building type of capabilities. That's going to become very important. And really being self-motivating to a large extent is going to become very important. So people who are more driven on their own for at least the remote jobs, that will become more important.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So looks like some of the cognitive and soft skills would become more pronounced along with skills. That's great.
Yeah.
So Ganesh, would you also like to talk about your module around how post the COVID or during the COVID, your tool is enabling people to see the fitment of a particular person to work in a remote environment, or maybe we can leave it to the last a few sentences on that.
Sure. I think I would probably have Venki and Aadesh talk more about the solutions, but in a nutshell, we do help the companies identify people who are comfortable working from home. And there is a specific factor similar to what Aadesh is mentioning, which is resilience, which includes the aspect of being collaborative, being agile, being able to take the stress, uncertain situations, being independent in terms of getting the work done. Those factors we look for in terms of just putting a tag if the person is able to work from home or not. And that is seen as a big value in the current era, especially some of the big deployments that are happening. So thanks, Radhesh. Yeah. So going into the same question for Venki, right? How do you see from the perspective of your partners and customers, and especially your partners being CHROs, and how do you see this transition being done on their side, hiring and even the entire HR strategies?
Yeah, I mean, more broadly, HR strategies and, specifically hiring I can cover, Ganesh. So the way we are seeing it is, and I think it's not just in the context of COVID, but also probably in the last, I would say specifically 3-4 years, most organizations had been focusing their data analytics strategy on some of the external functions that they thought gave them competitive advantage. And what I mean by external functions are functions around sales and marketing, supply chain. So these are all visible, they're all external and directly drives competitive advantage. And most of the investments were going there. And thankfully, organizations and our customers have realized that HR is central. It's an internal function, but there is an exponential benefit in investing in HR related data analytics, and COVID has made it even more pronounced. And I think when people have been saying, including some CHROs, that people are our greatest asset. Ironically, the investments, while it's an important statement and a powerful one at that, the investments did not necessarily justify that, and most organizations were seeing it more as HR is more as a transactional efficiency and as a cost function. But I think the realization now is it has to be a key value driver. I think that's the most important thing. And everywhere that we see, discussions happening around analytics and with CHROs, clearly we go back with the impression that investments in driving value through HR is coming out clearly. HR and CHROs have been seen as a clear strategic partner. I think that is really good news. And we're seeing increasing amount of spends in HR analytics. That's a very, very positive trend. But more importantly, one thing that we have seen work in a lot of our customers is HR analytics and data strategy related to HR cannot be seen as the exclusive forte of the HR function. I think it's very, very important. When we build solutions, that's the way we look at it. While the core of it may be partnering with the CHRO, looking at specific KPIs and outcomes, some of which that I covered earlier, including around attrition management, emotions, hiring, talent development, right? All of these are clear matrices that one can track. But if that becomes the exclusive forte of HR without broader business ownership, then the entire model fails. So what we do is our partnership model is very active with the HR setup. But when we deliver solutions, it's more in the context of making sure that people analytics is democratized to all the managers and line functions who are directly responsible for people. So I think that's very critical. So the solution deployment is embedded as part of the organizational process at an enterprise level. So that's how we have been driving our solutions.
Interesting, very interesting. Thanks for sharing those nuggets. Aadesh, one question I see is more in terms of, we were talking about work from home, and Gartners and Forresters and also McKinsey's have latched on to this new tag word that I see nowadays being used quite a bit, which is resilience. There are parameters within resilience, which is ability to take stress, ability to work virtually, ability to take uncertain situations, being collaborative, being productive in this new norm. How do you see this being impacting your business, and do you see this to be a focal point in terms of selection process as you look for new talent?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic. If you do a Google search on leadership, you're going to get several billion hits. But if you do Google search on self-leadership, you're going to get 0.1% of that, right? And self-leadership actually has been ignored for the last several decades. Leadership has been tom-tommed. Leadership seems to employ leading others, strategy, problem solving, innovation, all of that, right? But it's like, in India, they say there's a shadow beneath the lamp. Who is going to do that? Unless a person who is strong internally at the core, they're not going to be able to do that, right? And if you read the ancient Indian scriptures, Guru Nanak talked about saint warriors, right? So people who are strong and soft from inside, but they are trained enough to fight a big battle and win it like a warrior. Yeah. So that's what I call as self-leadership. It's really about how do you not depend on others and become strong yourself for learning, for your managing your emotions and happiness, for building relationships, and really how to deal with stress, how to rise from setbacks, right? And that's something on which I've been personally working more like a community service, and I see that increasingly becoming a part of organization's agenda, because the change today, the variables today, the entropy today is much, much more than what it was even 5 years ago. And in 5 years and 10 years, it's going to be exponentially higher. So we need people who can become resilient. And this seed is there in everyone, right? People will become what we expect them to become over time. And in addition to, yes, hiring, but it also needs to be built into the existing teams that companies have. So there is certainly a lot of work to be done there.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing those insights, and especially it's very interesting to see the 0.1%, the Google search. It's a very interesting analytics. And in line with the same question, Venki, from the customer's perspective, are you seeing this to be a critical factor as you're talking to customers? We were just talking to each other a couple of minutes ago. We said you get into these customer calls at least a couple of times a day, if not a week. Do you see the aspect of resilience being important from their perspective, and how TCS is helping them in this process?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think resilience is more important today than ever before. I mean, we can keep emphasizing that point again and again. What is very critical to understand is, one could drive this as a HR strategy, but it's really not going to work that way, right? I mean, it's important to understand that the employee engagement has a direct impact on everything that is important for the organization at an enterprise level, right? Whether it is the top line, whether it's the bottom line, whether it's the end customer experience of these organizations, every metric can get positively or negatively impacted depending on the level of engagement of the employee, right? I think, and in today's situation, it's even more important. And one can take a leaf from the healthcare industry, where we are seeing our own customers in the healthcare industry at the forefront, and clearly, and we are seeing this in a large country like India as well. You see those people that we call as COVID warriors, who are so motivated and so engaged, and they put their own personal fears and challenges behind for the larger good of humanity. So I think that is resilience to us. That's resilience that everybody needs to learn from. So, and resilience is also about adaptability. I mean, given that people are, face-to-face interactions are difficult to come by, one needs to look at how you can manage the entire change and ensure that the employees adapt to that situation and stay resilient. And one needs to look at creative solutions, right? Some of the traditional solutions that organizations have been using are clearly, out of the window. One needs to look at creative solutions. Also important is, something that Aadesh touched upon earlier. It's about a sense of, I would say, shared responsibility, right? I mean, not every solution in every situation is going to be, I have done this before, I know how it is done. So it's just a question of making sure that you're quick on your feet, you have a sense of shared responsibility, and you have a sense of accountability, but all of this with a sense of optimism. I think all of these need to come together for the organization to stay resilient and relevant in today's context.
Very interesting. One of the question, Aadesh, to you is, the other day I was just reading one of the article from Gartner's, and they were saying 74% of the CFOs, they did a survey with close to 100 companies and CFOs, 74%, staggering number of CFOs wanted their workforce to stay home, work from home, as a part of coming out of this COVID-19. Do you see that a reality from your perspective?
Yeah, I think this pandemic has certainly created a disruption, right? Like I was saying earlier, it's been a massive, long-lasting experiment that the world is going through, right? Including the corporate world and people who work there. So I think it has certainly established that a lot of work can be done remotely, and it can be done very well. But if you try to now forecast this into the future, to me, it does not look very direct and rosy, right? So let me give an example. In the last 5 months, we have had about 600 employees who have joined, right? New hires in the company around the world. They have joined at home. Their own home is their own office. They are working from home. They haven't met a single other employee in the company. Now, you use principle of induction and try to forecast it. If you have thousands of such employees, how are they going to be able to collaborate well? How do you develop culture, for example? And it starts to become a difficult question. I think the second is, if you see how there's, virtually you can do a lot of formal, well-planned interactions. But somebody from engineering running into somebody from product marketing, you just meet at the coffee, you discuss a problem, one thing can lead to the other, right? So these collisions that lead to innovation and increase in network of the people are really what makes the wheel spin, right? And I would say even take off. So those types of things are impossible to do in a virtual world. So it could happen eventually, maybe 10, 20, 30 years. But I don't see most companies going for a work from home only in the near term, right? Just when the COVID is going to be over, because people are already sharing a lot of issues about how they're not able to work, balance between work and home. They're this restriction of space will go away because, right now it's not safe to go out unless you have to. So I don't see this happening in any very big way. I think a leading edge will start, but it'll take time, and it'll take a long time for it to really get established.
Interesting, very interesting view. Thanks for sharing, Aadesh. From from the perspective of skills, right? As we're talking about soft skills, there's also one study that came out which said 87% of the skills that we are learning today would become obsolete in the next 3 to 5 years, which I find it very staggering. And of that, they are saying 64% would be towards soft skills. From that perspective, are you taking any steps, Aadesh, to you? One more question is, are you taking any steps to tackle this as an organization level? If you can share some nuggets, that'll be awesome.
Sure. See, personal skills versus professional skills, right? Soft skills versus technical skills. I think this has been there for a long time. Personal skills have always been important. For example, if you look at a role model, somebody who you admire, what are things you admire about that, right? If you write 20 things, 17 out of those are going to be soft skills. So it's not a new finding. It has always been true. Now, but certain events happen, then something comes to the fore, and I personally agree with you. So technical skills can make you very efficient and a subject matter expert. But personal skills or soft skills can give you excellence, can give you effectiveness. It can be a force multiplier on the professional or technical skills, right? And at Tata Communications, we're taking a multi-pronged approach. So, like Venki was saying, it's the HR product. HR is characterized as a product at Tata Communications. And that product is an intelligent platform where employees in different roles are really the customers, and they should be able to do, like they use Amazon to buy anything, or they use Netflix to, entertainment. That's the type of thing, whether it's for career, is for learning, for anything else. They should be able to do it on their own without talking to anybody, and there should be an instant gratification. It's not dependent on somebody. It should not be controlled by anybody, and it is intelligent. It is driven by data. It is self-learning. So we have really built that already, and that includes learning. So the way we have built the learning platform is that based on the role that you have and how you become better in performing that role, both technically and in soft skills, or the role that you want to target. Based on that, you really start getting intelligent feeds on what more could you do, both technically and in soft skills, right? So the other thing that's very important for us, for example, is collaboration, right? How do you do horizontal execution, working with your peers and outside of your immediate work group? So we actually, for our top 250 leaders, we run a collaboration effectiveness survey, right? How well do you collaborate? And everybody gets feedback from about 15 people that they work with the most. Or for all people managers, we have a manager scorecard, and they get feedback from their teams once a year based on how well they do all the soft stuff. And the development, how do you become better at that, is then, mass customized for each individual based on what their feedback is, and all their learning is then used for that. So basically, over the last 4 years, we have been able to, deliver, compared to say 4 years ago, 20% of our programs were digitally delivered learning. Today, 90% of our training is delivered digitally. So we did 90,000 training days last year. 90% of that was delivered digitally. And average learning per employee per year has doubled in 4 years, more than doubled, because it's now available 24/7. It's self-service. It's in bits and bytes. You can learn anytime, and it's been really magical. And we measure internal customer feedback using the Net Promoter Score, and that actually has increased significantly. Our latest score is 79, which is really top of the chart. So there's a big demand when you make a good product and create it, make it intelligent, and give it and make it a good user experience. People start lapping it up, and so I think I agree with that. Soft skills are very important.
That's very interesting. So what I'm hearing from one of the nuggets, especially for me, is if you personalize the experience for every users or every employee with respect to an outcome, you're seeing quite a bit of traction. It's amazing that you have 90% of it going digital, which looks like you're blazing the trail. Thanks for sharing, Aadesh. On the same lines, Venki, question to you is, how are you helping from the delivery perspective or solutioning perspective to your customers, especially around the skill gaps and identifying what is the required skill that may be coming down the lane, and how do you fulfill that more effectively for their employees?
Sure, I think that's a very good question, Ganesh. I think I would look at it in two different dimensions, right? One is the external dimension, and the other is the internal dimension. And the external dimension is so important because if you have to stay relevant to what's going on in this world, you have to make sure that the external dimensions are properly captured, and you're able to draw in elements of that into your proactive learning strategy, right? And if you look at, let's look at some fundamental things, and that there are some things that will come down to hard skills. There are some things that will come down to soft skills. The entire environment is changing. The tastes and preferences are rapidly evolving. It's a hyper-connected world. A lot of the processes are today and moving towards zero-touch process and going through AI and robotic process automation. Some of the solutions have to be given real time, and it's humanly impossible to deliver real-time solutions without technology. So I think the fundamentals of the game have totally changed. But what's critical to realize is this is not for something for anybody to fear. I mean, certainly not for people, because I think all of us will stay relevant. And the way I would say it is, you can be relevant if you choose to stay relevant, right? I mean, so there will be newer opportunities, there will be newer skills, but it's a question of making sure that we align these skills to that need that exists, right? And if you take a simple industry like manufacturing, a huge amount of automation, huge amount of technology interventions. I was just looking at some data the other day, close to about 3 million jobs in manufacturing in 10 years. And when we say jobs, these are not just going to be incremental jobs, right? These are not going to be over and above what exists today. These are jobs that require newer skills, right? So which means some of the older skills will be redundant and newer skills will have to be learned. So it'll come down to reskilling of the workforce. And I think so it's important to also have, Aadesh talked about digitization. So I did talk about all the external dimensions and that data, which is so important for driving internal strategy. It's also important to look at the internal data, right? I mean, and digitization, the good thing about digitization is you have all the data that you need. And, organizations talk about hyper-personalization in the context of customer experience and customer offers. I would say, why not hyper-personalization for the employee, right? And TCS has those solutions, to look at, where are the current skill sets, where does the organization want to be, and where do we want that employee to be? What is that gap? Are you able to capture that and give that feedback on a real-time basis? And are you able to run a proactive program to be able to upskill people and so that they stay relevant to it? So I think it's a combination of internal and external factors, and being able to hyper personalize the learning experience. Also important is, it's good to have recommendations for an employee to say, look, you have to look at the skill, try and upskill yourself, and you can drive it as a top level mandate, but really it doesn't work that way, right? I think it's important to also keep the motivation of the employee in mind, and it's extremely critical to create self-sustaining outreach programs to be able to help the employee maximize participation in some of the what I would say employee communicated kind of initiatives in nurturing that learning environment. I think so. It has to be more group and team behavior as opposed to just actions can be individual driven, but one needs to look at it holistically as a team behavior.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing. And I see a couple of questions coming on the chat. One of them is, Aadesh, I'll ask this question to you. What best practices have you put in place for most of the talents who are working remotely?
So, fortunately, we did not have to put any best practice in place due to the pandemic, right? Like I said, and Venki has been emphasizing that if you have a good digital intelligent platform, you can provide everything the way it was being provided earlier, right? So for us, from the point of view of, since we have been developing that platform for the last 5-6 years, everything is digitized, right from hiring to onboarding to induction to development to career building to everything, learning. It's really been not a problem for us. So it's been actually a good test of a strategy that we are able to use it under any condition. And the best practice would be, and both Venki and I are saying the same thing, that HR needs to take a product management business approach, become an enabler rather than a controller, create a great product that's a win-win-win for the business and the employees and other stakeholders, make it open and self-service, leverage communities, and let people do what they want. And HR as a product manager keeps on creating a better product and then marketing it so that there is big usage, and measure itself not through how good a product has been created, but is it delivering the business outcomes for various stakeholders, right? Whether it's about skills of the future, whether it's about employee engagement, whether it's about how well employees are growing, whatever. And if we take that approach, then it is going to work under all circumstances, all conditions. And the more digital you are, the better you can serve virtually.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. And I'm just looking at the time as well, being conscious. Just 4 minutes to go. So I think the final question to you both, I think I'll start with Venki and then to Aadesh. If there are 3 takeaway messages that you would like to have from this conversation with respect to the customers and partners that you're serving, what would that be as you're sharing some of the nuggets with the audience?
Yeah, I would say that, whether it's a pandemic or not, it's possible to take a very strong data-centric approach to how organizations want to drive their people practices. And in that sense, the biggest handicap that we encounter is the level of data maturity related to people-related dimensions. I think I would say strongly look at data maturity and from a people or an HR standpoint, and look at how one can drive proactive people-related practices on the back of that data. Second, I would say that it's important that, let me put it very simply, I think knowing your workforce, right? I mean, while a lot of organizations play lip service to it, it's important to again look at that very seriously, the aspect of knowing your workforce and And that's essentially around taking a very people-centric approach based on data and driving proactive strategies around it. And I would say that it's possible to drive huge amount of analytics based solutions, and there are a lot of powerful solutions. And analytics must be disruptive. We are not talking traditional, we are talking disruptive in terms of thought and action. And all of this will deliver tremendous value to the organization in every respect, and will also help with a greatly engaged workforce.
That's really cool. Thank you. And Aadesh, from your perspective, what should be the 3 takeaway message that we should have from this conversation?
Okay, so I think the first one is digital and virtual, right? And Venki has been emphasizing it too, that the better digital adoption we do, and digital is actually can be a big word, right? So it's about digitization, it's about predictive analytics, it's about intelligence, it's about hyper virtualization, it's about product management, and it's about being business centric or outcome driven, right? So if you're able to do that, then the talent management strategy of the company can be a force multiplier. And I would say the biggest force multiplier for the company's success in the future, because ultimately it's really the people who really make things happen, right? I think the second thing I would say is a push and pull approach to talent management, right? While the companies have worked, if you read Ramcharan's book on talent, right, it really talks about how can you identify top talent, the hypos, and how do you develop them over time. With technology, it is possible to deliver the same offer to 100% of your employees, right? So the pull strategy, the push strategy is the company institutes a hyper program, you select a few people, and then you work them through, grow them, right, develop them. So that can be done. But the pull strategy is how do you make that offering available to 100% of the employees and egg them to use that so that they can keep. So then the competition can be between the push and the pull strategy and see which wins, right? That'll be my second takeaway. I think the third is, what I would say is leadership. While we are working on building a great company, becoming a better career, learning this, that, ask ourselves, are we happy? And happiness is a skill that can be learned. And you talked about resilience, how can you become resilient, right? Ultimately, whatever we do, we are doing it because we want to become happy, right? So while we are running this race, aspiring to be happy, can you be happy now and still run the race? Because then you can run the race even better, right? And as a happiness teacher and being involved in this thing about happiness and mindfulness for the last 20 years, I have learned that happiness is a skill that can be learned. It's really our nature, and just like anything else, it needs some practice. So those will be my 3 messages.
That's really cool. And Aadesh, I'd love to probably have a follow-up session, hopefully to understand more about the happiness work that you're doing. I think that is so relevant right now than any other time. So thank you, both of you, for being a part of this session. And for all the folks who are looking at the screen, there is a link provided in the chat window, which is basically a free assessment. You can take your assessment, and in terms of the same plugin, we are able to identify some of your strengths. You can do it for free, just takes a minute. And if you want to download the reports, there is also a code that has been provided that gives you 50% discount if you want to do that. But thank you so much, Aadesh, and also Venki, for your time. I think this was at least a lot of nuggets I could pick from this conversation that can also help me strategize as we are looking at solving some of the business pain points. With that being said, I would pass it on back to Radhesh. Thank you for this opportunity, Radhesh. I'll let you close the session.
Thanks a lot, Ganesh. It was, I think, a great session Aadesh and Venki, really appreciate your time. There was quite a bit of interest from the audience as well. And you both, you all three have a great weekend ahead. And I would also like to thank all the audience for attending, although being it's a Friday evening. Many thanks for coming and attending that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time. Have a good day and good weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.